The stark honesty of the authors of the Bible is another unique and divine feature of the Bible, a quality vividly exhibited in a passage in Deuteronomy chapter 9, verses 6 and 7. Understand therefore that the Lord thy God giveth thee not this good land to possess it for thy righteousness, for thou art a stiff-necked people. Remember and forget not how thou provokest the Lord thy God to wrath in the wilderness. From the day that thou didst depart out of the land of Egypt until ye came unto this place, ye have been rebellious against the Lord. Here Moses reminds the people of their continuous rebelliousness against God, even after witnessing numerous miracles since their departure from Egypt. This forthrightness in acknowledging their collective sinfulness is extraordinary, especially considering these words were spoken by Moses, a leader who, if not divinely inspired, might have shied away from broadcasting such unflattering truths about his own people. This transparency is an exclusive hallmark of biblical writing. Though the authors were part of the very nation they critiqued, they did not hesitate to expose the foolishness, unfaithfulness, and outright rebellion of their people. They recorded instances of ingratitude and disobedience towards God, despite his ongoing guidance and miracles. This level of candor is unparalleled in other religious or historical texts, where authors might be tempted to gloss over or omit the less commendable aspects of their people's history. The Bible's unvarnished portrayal of Israel's history, including its people's frequent lapses into sin and unfaithfulness, stands in sharp contrast to typical historical accounts, which often aim to glorify the subject. This honesty is not aimed at depicting Israel as uniquely depraved, but rather at highlighting a realistic picture of human nature, one that other historical narratives inevitably choose to idealize or obscure. Additionally, biblical writers exhibit an extraordinary commitment to truth by meticulously documenting their nation's spiritual failures, including the grievous turn to idolatry and the adoption of grotesque practices from neighboring cultures, such as child sacrifices to deities like Molech. This truthfulness, especially about practices as heinous as child sacrifice, suggests an unparalleled divine compulsion to maintain a faithful record, transcending any natural inclination to conceal or gloss over such national transgressions. The prophet Jeremiah's personal struggles encapsulate the intense conflict faced by these writers. Tasked with delivering stern warnings to Jerusalem, he became a target of hostility, facing severe persecution for prophesying the Babylonian conquest as divine retribution for the people's sins. His candid confession in Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 9, reveals the turmoil of a prophet torn between the impulse to silence and the overpowering urgency to speak God's truth. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. But his word was in mine heart as a burning fire, shut up in my bones. And I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay. This passage vividly illustrates the internal fire that compelled Jeremiah to speak, despite the personal cost, indicating a divine mandate that outweighed human desire for comfort or safety. The inclusion of such distressing details in the biblical narrative which reflected poorly on the writer's own people, attests to a divine imperative that drove them to prioritize truth over national pride. Their willingness to expose the darkest episodes of their history without sanitization or justification highlights a unique aspect of the biblical text, its unflinching honesty to faithfully transmit their experiences and warnings, regardless of the personal or collective shame such revelations might bring. The biblical narrative is also unique in its transparent record of its most admired figures, unmasking their flaws alongside their faith. This transparency extends across both the Old and New Testaments, where even Abraham and Moses are exhibited with their weaknesses. Abraham's moments of doubt and deceit, Jacob's manipulation to secure his brother's birthright, Moses' moment of disobedience at Horeb, and David's grievous sins, despite his status as a man after God's own heart, are all laid bare. These accounts are not sanitized hero tales. They are raw and real, showing that these individuals, though sincere in their faith, were profoundly human, subject to sin, fear, and failure. In the New Testament, this unflinching honesty persists. John the Baptist, despite his prominent role, harbors doubts about Christ from his prison cell. The disciples, chosen to spread Christ's teachings and establish the early church, are frequently seen in moments of fear, misunderstanding, and rivalry, as seen when they dispute who among them is the greatest. Mark chapter 9, verses 33 to 35. He asked them, "What was it that ye disputed among yourselves by the way?" But they held their peace, for by the way they had disputed among themselves who should be the greatest. And he sat down and called the 12, and saith unto them, If any man desire to be first, the same shall be last of all, and servant of all. Here we see their vulnerabilities are clearly exposed, including their disbelief and fear following Jesus' crucifixion, contrasting with the women's faith and courage to visit the tomb first. The consistency of this transparency continues with the apostles and early church leaders in the fledgling Christian community. Instances like Peter's hypocrisy in distancing himself from Gentile Christians, or John's misstep in worshipping an angel, reveal that even the most esteemed figures are not beyond moments of weakness and failure. These narratives are devoid of the usual embellishments or excuses found in other historical or religious texts, highlighting a divine influence in their composition, ensuring that the truth, however uncomfortable or humbling, is recorded for posterity.